So now let's move on to, we have a glut. What do we do with these bloody vegetables before they go bad and we have to just give it all to our animals or, compost these lovely vegetables that
we eat them? Like for me, when when I grow tomatoes, I will always grow an excess of tomatoes because the bugs are going to get some of them because we don't use any sprays, and at the moment we're not very consistent with our exclusion netting. So
out of having to think about what was here last year and planning, taking away that element of not having to rotate crops is huge for me because I was very into that.
Women on a green mission. Follow along as two friends document their unfurling permaculture journeys.
Join our chats each week where we will be sharing how we and others apply the ethics and principles of permaculture to our gardens and daily life.
We're no experts. We're at the start of our journey, learning and fumbling our way to a greener life. You're guaranteed to witness a few successes, plenty of failures, laughs and swearing. We'd love your company along the way.
You're listening to the Practical Permaculture Podcast with Jo Flintham and Elise Gallagher.
Good morning, Elise. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. What's been happening?
We finally got some sunny weather down here in Adelaide.
Yeah, because it was cold, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm still in Adelaide. It was cold. We had rain. Christmas was rainy. Yesterday we had a beautiful beach day. Today the sun's shining, so the kids are at the park. We'll probably do the beach again this afternoon and get out there and make the most of it. Only here for a few more days, and then we'll be heading back to New South Wales. So yeah, just making the most of our family time. I want to try and get up and see, I think it's called the Food Forest that Anthea mentioned in our podcast with her. She did her training.
Yeah, that's down that way. Yeah,
it's in Gawler, which isn't too far from where we are. So I think you have to kind of book in. I haven't really been that organised, so we'll see. I'd love to get up there while we're down here because I don't know when we're going to be back down here again. But yeah, that's kind of me and what's been happening in our little world. The kids have been driving me a bit bonkers, but we'll try and stick with the positives.
Well, it is the silly season and they're out of routine and you're with family and it's all of those things. So
they're just eating shit food and they're like,
who isn't?
I know, true. And they're not in their normal beds and we're all literally, I'll show you, we're all here on the floor in beds. Sleeping in the room.
Like you're having a camp out.
Yeah, so I think they're a bit over it. And just lots of people around. They're just so overstimulated. So we're all kind of hanging to get into our routine again, but loving family time with all of our relatives. So making the most of it.
Oh, that's so good. That's good.
What about you? What have you been up to this week?
We've had a really it's been nice actually. We had a really quiet Christmas and we've just been really taking care of ourselves and being really slow and really intentional and, just catching up. And saw Mum and Dad yesterday and had brekkie with another friend, Jane and her husband Ken, and talked garden. They've got a cracking garden going. So talked about, food growing and just all sorts of bits and pieces. Yeah. And then I was meant to pop in and visit my my bestie yesterday afternoon, and we got totally distracted on the way home. We left Mum and Dad's and we're too busy talking about a whole heap of other stuff, and then we got halfway home and realised that we forgot to pop in.
Whoopsies.
So yeah, we're going to try and catch up on New Year's. I think that we'll try and catch up New Year's Day if she's available, because New Year's Eve we're planning to do nothing because we're not going to go anywhere. We don't want to party. We actually want to get up. Well, I know when I say me, want to get up, watch the sunrise, and just really bring in the new year, just in a really nice, calm and open and vibrant sort of way, rather than waking up with a dirty hangover, being tired and thinking, oh my goodness, now I've got to go back to work on the 2nd, and just not feeling ready and prepared. So I'm doing something totally different, and just going to have a very cool, calm, collected vibe. And I think New Year's Day we're going to a sound meditation over at the yoga shed. An hour and a half sound meditation and intention setting session. So that's going to be a really beautiful way to start the new year. So I'm excited for that.
My stepmom actually is doing her training to do sound bath. So she's got all her big bowls and she got them out the other day and the kids are just
Oh,
like, oh,
they're
sitting there with their
so
mouths
good.
open. Yeah. So, but I think we're going to do New Year's just chill too. We're going to get we're going to do a fancy chill New Year's. We're getting some oysters because we're in
Ooh.
South Australia. So get some Coffin Bay oysters, a little bit of seafood, and we'll just chill out, put the kids to bed. And yeah, we'll just have some adult chill out time, nice, quiet night in. So yeah.
Sounds so good. I think a lot of people are doing that this year. I think,
Mm,
the days of, I don't know, maybe it's an age thing too, but the
I think
days of,
so.
you know, going out and having a huge party. Mind you, like,
Mm,
our son Mitch has gone camping with his mates up at one of the local dams here. And,
yeah.
he said, yeah, we're just going to have a really chill New Year's as well. Like, it's not going to be a huge, big party. It's just,
Mm-mm.
big group of friends getting together and,
Yeah.
have a bit to eat. And, Mitch
Yeah.
will cook up something magical because he's, he loves to cook. So,
That's so
he'll
nice.
cook the group something and they'll have a few beers and that'll be about it. So,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Lovely.
So, what are we talking
So,
about today?
yes, today we are talking about the inevitable summer glut of
Yes.
vegetables.
And we all have it, even when we don't plan to have it, we all
Yeah.
have it because everything
Yeah.
likes to come on, especially at the end of summer. Everything
Mm-hmm.
seems to have the last, like I know with the tomatoes, like you might, have sort of consistency throughout the season and you've done,
And then,
some successional planting and then we sort of have this little tiny cold snap and then it gets warm again. And then that's the point where the tomatoes go, shit, we need to do everything right now. This is it. This is our last chance. And it's just like everything explodes at that last minute. I found cucumbers are the same. They did that to me last year as well. Not a problem though, because I totally use them. But that's what we're going to talk about today is what do we do with that glut and maybe how we can avoid having a huge glut if we don't want that.
yeah.
But yeah, really, what can we do with it? Because it's kind of inevitable a little bit that it's going
Mm-hmm.
to happen, right?
Yeah. So before we get too far into it, let's just acknowledge where we're recording on today. So where are you, Joe?
I am at home in the Hunter Valley and I am on Wanneroo country.
And I'm still down in Adelaide, so I'm in Ghana country.
I love that you're traveling around and just being able to explore all of these different, nations and lands and places that you're
Yeah.
going to and having those moments and seeing the different landscapes and really feeling into that. I think
Yeah,
that's
we were
gorgeous.
because I have to figure out where it is. Like I don't know this area. I've got to jump on, and normally it's the local council website, so I get like a little bit of a history too. And like there's three different groups of people that lived here, even though it's the one nation, and just learning about them. And so yeah, it's kind of nice that I get to do that each time I'm in somewhere different. But we were talking the other day. We went to a park that's further down south on the Fleur Peninsula, and yeah, just the landscape from Adelaide Hills to where we are here in town, or not town, but on the edge of town by the ocean. And then further down, even though it's still coastal, it just looks so much more arid and the vegetation changes so quickly. Like it's just, and then when you go over just one peninsula over, which is only like a couple of hours away, it's just like flat and dry
Just
and
totally different.
totally arid again. Yeah. So it is a really cool place down here because you get to see so much in such a small kind of space. And the ocean, like when you go to the beach, there's just these big red cliffs here and, a bit further down south. So
It's so
yeah,
dramatic,
it's
isn't
really
it?
cool.
Like the,
Oh,
the
yeah.
the landscape and the changes and
Yeah. Yeah. And then the hills is different. Like I said, it's all lush and green and it, especially in that autumny winter time, it feels like Europe almost. Like it's really different. So much colder than here. And so, yeah, it's really beautiful. Let's get into it, I guess. The
yeah.
glut.
Yeah. So I suppose, yeah, first of all, what is a glut? So for anyone who may not have grown food before and doesn't really understand what we're talking about with veggie glut, it's that moment where it is just you are overwhelmed with produce. You have an abundance of produce that all ripens and is ready to be harvested all at the same time. And
Hmm.
it's really, I see it as it's when it's too much for you. It's too
Yes.
much for you to be using for what you intended it for. So, like for me, when when I grow tomatoes, I will always grow an excess of tomatoes because the bugs are going to get some of them because, we don't
Mhm.
use any sprays, and at the moment we're not very consistent with our exclusion netting. So that's we're going to be putting in an exclusion tunnel, so we're going to get bigger gluts. But I know that there's a good portion of that they're going to go to the bugs and the caterpillars and the birds, and that's cool. I'm happy to share. But I also know that at the end of the season, I'm going to get that big glut where I'm then able to process those tomatoes. So I'll turn those into, a passata, or
Mm.
I will put them in the dehydrator or the oven and dry them out, and then, either pop them in oil or use them in other ways. So there's lots of different things that I do with those. And
Yeah.
that's just, tomatoes are just an easy example of that.
Mm.
But yeah, and then anything else is, for me,
The glut.
I'll give them away, really. Like
Yeah.
it's, like
Yeah, yeah.
zucchinis, we've been overrun with zucchinis this year because everyone's overrun with
Yes.
zucchinis every year. Um,
Yeah.
but after this, I'm actually going to go inside and do some pickling. And we gave away a few yesterday, and we'll give away some more. We've given some to the cafe that we supply the eggs to as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's essentially what I'm doing with those few things. But
Yeah.
yeah, what are some
So
other
I
things
guess,
that you can do?
yeah, before we even get, oh, I just flicked that there. Before we even get into what you can do, I guess, is the planning side. So sometimes, like you said, you plan for the excess because you do want not a glut, but a lot of tomatoes. So I guess to plan in the first place to avoid a glut, because we've all been there as a first time or a newer gardener and gone, oh, I'm going to plant 4 zucchini plants, thinking that that will give you adequate zucchinis. And then you realize that one plant probably could have given you adequate zucchinis, and you've got all of these zucchinis that you just can't cope with. So I guess, yeah, the first step in avoiding a glut, if you do want to avoid it, is that to plant less and to only plant what you think that you'll be able to use and process and eat. And also only planting what you like to eat, I think, is another good point.
That's
Like,
a really good point. Yep.
people get gluts of things because it's like, oh, I can't actually eat this much cucumber, or I don't actually use a lot of cucumber. Like, maybe cucumber's a bad example, but those.
Chili's a great example, because
Yes, that's
if you get
true.
people that don't eat chili, but they've got like 10 chili plants going, and you're like,
But
well,
even one chili plant can be
oh,
enough if
just
you're not
tons.
really into chilies, So yeah, only planting what you think you really like to eat, and then also planning ahead and saying, well, how much is this going to give me? Doing a bit of research on how much food that plant will provide for you. And then also just keeping track. So at the end of the year, when that season's up,
Yes.
keeping a diary and actually recording how much you got, making some notes for when next season comes around, the same season comes around, and saying, you know what, 3 or 4 zucchini plants was way too many. I need 1, I need 2. Or the opposite, if you found that you needed more of a plant, making
Mm-hmm.
sure you do plant more of that. So just recording it somehow, whether it's writing it down, having it on a calendar, something like that, so that you can either avoid a glut or make sure you're planting enough. I think that's kind of the first step.
I
But
love that.
also, yeah, but also, like you said, inevitably there is going to be a glut. Like, you can
You'll
only
have some
eat
at
so
some
many,
stage.
like citrus is a good example too. You can
Yeah.
only have so many limes and lemons before you're like, okay, enough with the lemons. Like, I can only use them in so many ways. Um, so yeah, it's gonna happen no matter how good your planning is and how good you are with your crop timing and things like that. You will get en masse vegetables. So, and
And I
fruits.
love with the planning and the diary entries as well. And this is something that I've been a bit shit with over the
I'm
years as well.
so bad with it. So
I've
bad.
just started journaling. So not even sort of in that garden space, but just for myself of an evening,
Mm,
because,
mm.
the benefits of journaling are fantastic. But I don't know, I've always just been really resistant to it, or I felt that it's such an effort. And what I've done is just started writing a couple of dot points, and then that's
Yeah.
it. So I'm really limited, and I'm finding that's helping. So total side note on that. But
I'm just lazy. I just
yeah,
I just can't factor that into my time. And
it's like
I'm
just
actually
too much.
I'm really inspired by Catherine, who was in our PDC, because we're still keeping in contact with her. and she came to our little get together that we had just
Yeah.
before Christmas and showed me her diary and showed me all her, and I was like, oh my God, Catherine, this is so cool. And she said she uses, I'm pretty sure I'll put it in the show notes, the Diggers Club. They're, it's
Yeah.
specifically for the
Yep.
garden. So
Yep.
I thought maybe if I have something specifically for the garden, it might be a bit more inspiring, or I might reach for it more. So I'm going to try and find something. I'll probably go with theirs because hers looks really cool. And yeah, try
There's
and
lots.
document.
There's so
And
many out there.
Brett was really inspiring. I know he writes a lot of notes. I don't think he uses anything in particular, but also having like a photo record and actually keeping on top of that is something I really want to try and do. Because even if you're not a write down person, at least visually you can take that photo, look back before you start planning and go, oh shit, that was a fuckload of zucchinis that I had to deal with. Do you remember how much space that pumpkin took up? Like, I think if you can see it visually, that really helps too, if that's how you work.
It does.
That's another way, I guess, to do it.
There's a cool app that, and I've used it on and off, and I've started using it again this season, called Gardenate. And it's really, really good. So it can help you to plan what you're going to be putting in, whether it's a seedling, a crown, or a bulb, whatever it is that you're planting in. You can totally modify it. You can add your own to it. You can take photos. You can make diary notes. It gives you reminders for harvesting. And I've then even started mucking around with that and putting in, when I actually want to do amendments to the garden bed. So when I want to be adding compost or worm castings, or, when I have actual chores to do in the garden, I add that as a plant and then put a harvest time reminder in so that it then dings me to say, hey, this weekend you'd plan to do X, Y, and Z. So
that's clever.
So for anyone who's a bit more leaning towards technology and not like a paper type diary, it's a really cool little app. And it's I don't know if it's on Android. I'm an Apple user, so I know that you can get it on iPad and on the iPhone. So
because I did that. Yeah, I did that with my calendar. So I sat down with like when I should be resowing things, like your quick growing greens and things like that. And then I also sat down and planned for the whole couple months ahead, saying, okay, well, I should start thinking about strawberries or whatever it was on these weeks. So I sat down and did that. But adding the amendments and things would be really beneficial too, I think, especially if you're in those still annual beds and not in that perennial system so much where you are having to probably add things in more. So I'm not still that little idea.
Yeah, even for the perennials, I started adding in when sort of roughly around what time of year am I going to be planning to add those amendments? Like, when am I going to be applying some, weed tea to my fruit trees, and when's pruning going to happen? I mean, I know when it's going to happen, but I'm just putting it in there in one space so it's out of my brain. I don't have to consciously think about it, and I've got a reference point so that I can plan as well. So I go, okay, well, I know that I'm home this weekend, so this weekend I'm going to go and do all of these jobs, or hey, I've got a few days off, I can go and get these jobs done, or and I mean, that's all subject to weather as well. So like if you've got rain coming, then I'm going to be out there, and I might add compost and some more mulch, in preparation for the rain, or whatever that looks like. So, it's not nothing's set in stone, because nothing's absolute. But yeah, it's cool. And there's also, if someone's into using Excel and things like that, you can go online and just Google, successional planting spreadsheets, which are really good, and they can help you to plan out as well. And there was something else when you were talking about planning and talking about the amount of plants that you need. Something that popped up for me was the space that you've got as well. So planning your garden beds, I mean, this is sort of on the planning more than the glut side a bit, but knowing how much space that you've got, because that's great if you like you said, you want to put your four zucchinis in, but if they're going to take up a ton of room and you don't have that room, then understanding how much space you've actually got to work with, and considering what that plant is then going to produce for you at the end.
Yeah, I think it kind of does tie in with the glut though, because if you are planting things too close together and you've only planned for 2 plants because last time you had a glut and you've planted them too close together, you might get less because it doesn't have the space to kind of take up and grow. So, you might be saying, I only want 2 because I had a glut, and then you only plant 2 and you go, oh, but now I don't have enough because I've planted them too close together. So it's definitely a consideration when you are planning for how much food you need and a glut and just what you think you're going to use up. So it is a good point, I think, to make.
Yeah. And to extend on that too, considering what your season's going to be like. So if you know that you're going to get smashed, like, this summer's, we know that this is going to be a hot, dry summer. So making those plans for that as well, and knowing that if you've had a really wet, humid summer in years before and you've had a huge glut, then maybe this year you're just not going to get that same amount of produce because of the climatic conditions, and also the garden bed that you're planting in. If you have rotated garden beds, how old is it? How much life does it have in the soil? What amendments have you put in there? All of those considerations, things, they're not absolutes again, but they're things to think about when, you're thinking, okay, how much produce am I going to get off this plant?
Yeah. And I think also, like you said, if you know it's going to be a dry summer, do you consider wicking beds because you want to get more out of it? That all does come into how much produce you're going to get from your garden.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. There's so many things to think about, and I think too, like for anyone listening to this and they're going, "Oh my god, like there's just too much to think about. I can't cope. I just wanted to grow a couple of plants of whatever." These again, they're not. They're not going to make or break your garden. They're just things to think about. And I think, coming back to the diary that's so important, is recording, like just if this is your first year of doing something, just do it. Just get in there and do it and just go for it and just see what happens.
Well, you know who else is really good, I found, at recording? They weigh everything, like it's next level, is Charles Dowding.
Yes.
He's really good. And I've actually, when you talked about rotational gardens, it made me think of him because he's actually coming up to year 10 or 11 of his dig, no dig comparison. Have you seen that video?
I've seen, I've watched parts of it, yeah.
Well, he's done one quite recently, and he's saying now he found the first couple of years it didn't matter so much, but his no dig comparison. And he said now he's found, and also not rotating. So he doesn't do crop rotation through his beds. He just plants what he plants because of the no dig method. He believes it is continually building the soil up. It doesn't need a rest. It doesn't need, it's not going to get damaged by, root and rot nematodes and things because it's full of life and it can deal with it essentially. And he will only rotate it if he does get something affecting his crop. So in these 2 bed comparisons, he's now found that coming onto year 10 or 11, whatever year it is, that the no dig bed is now outperforming the dig bed because it's actually suffering from being turned and not having, he puts the same amount of compost on both beds every year, but he's still finding that it actually isn't now performing as well, and he's finding that he's getting way more out of his no dig beds without rotating crops. So it's all a consideration.
Yeah, that's really cool. That is really cool.
Having to think about what was here last year and planning, like taking away that element of not having to rotate crops is huge for me because I was very into that. And now understanding that I don't actually need to do that. And in nature, they don't rotate crops. It's just polycultures and abundance. Like that's the aim, not necessarily having to rotate through beds.
So nature doesn't sort of go, oh, well, I won't put that wild brassica over here because there was one here last year. I'll pop it over the other side.
Yeah.
But it's so true. It's if you look after the soil and you make sure that you have got an abundance of life in your soil, everything else will take care of itself.
We are getting a tad off track.
We are, aren't we? But,
Sorry. So now let's move on to, we have a glut. What do we do with these bloody vegetables before they go bad and we have to just give it all to our animals or, compost these lovely vegetables that are totally usable?
That's what we do. We eat them all. We just live on our glutted vegetables for forever.
Zucchinis for breakfast, lunch and dinner.
Yep,
could you imagine?
Ugh. No,
so
I
yes,
love them, not that much.
We can eat them, but what are some other ways that we can use them up, preserve them, save them for later and make the most of them? What are your favourite ways to
Ooh,
deal with
I
the glut
am.
veggies?
I'm definitely a dehydrator. I
Oh, see, I'm
love.
not.
I quite
Yeah,
enjoy the process because it's easy, probably.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, we do dehydrate a lot of things, not everything though. And again, it depends on what we're going to use it for and how we're going to use it. So I wouldn't dehydrate something that um, wouldn't necessarily reconstitute into a meal that I'm going to make. But I do dehydrate. So we do that a lot with our citrus, our berries as well,
yeah.
dehydrated berries, a lot of fruit, dehydrated fruit. We put that into our snack mix and things like that.
Do
Um,
you dehydrate in an electric one, or do you use an oven or a solarizer out, like a sun version? How do you do that?
we have an electric dehydrator, a multi-draw. I think it's like a 12-draw dehydrator.
Yeah.
And that's what we use because we find that's the easiest. I
Hmm.
really, I really love the idea and some of the concepts and the designs that I've seen of the outdoor
The solar ones.
solarizers. I mean, and look,
Yeah.
really, they are so easy to make if you've got the time and the nous to do that. To be able to put one together, it's not hard.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, for us, it's mainly in the dehydrator and sometimes
Yeah.
in the oven.
Hmm.
But yeah, we do that. We do a fair amount of canning as well, and it's mostly.
Okay.
I'm not super experienced in canning. I'm still very early stages of that. So I'll do a lot of water bath canning. So that's for a lot of the high acidity foods.
Right.
So I'll do that. I do have a pressure canner. I've not ventured into the pressure canning yet, so I haven't. I just haven't had a need. So that's still
Yeah.
sitting, waiting
This is
to.
all foreign to me. I don't do any of this.
So, oh well, when you come over, we'll have a
Yeah.
canning session.
Yeah, not
um,
never.
and the other thing is really easy to do, and anyone can do is like a quick pickle. And I know that
Yeah.
you've quick pickled before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So that's my go-to. Pickling and freezing. They're my two ways to deal with gluts. So anything I can freeze, I do. So things like avocados, obviously fruit, heaps of fruit, um, veggies we freeze, and I'm really good at labeling it. Or instead of just using the veggie frozen, I'll actually make meals out of them. So not
yep.
just freezing the veg, but if we have a heap of whatever, I'll make the meal that has that vegetable or fruit in it and freeze the meal because I'm more likely to just pull a meal out than necessarily I could do use frozen fruit, veggies, but I just find if I can make the meal straight off the bat, I've
It's
used it
just
and I feel like
easy.
it's gone, yeah, like gone to a good purpose that way. So yeah, freezing's definitely my go-to. I love doing it, labeling it all, being all organized. That's type A me. I love it. And I love a good pickling session. So we do a lot of pickling of our zucchini,
Well, that's what I'm
because
going
it's
to be
kind
doing
of,
after we've had
yeah,
our chat. Yep.
because it's that watery consistency. I don't find it freezes well. I know some people grate it, squeeze out the water and freeze it, but that's not something that I like. I don't like the texture of it once it kind of defrosts. So yeah, we do a lot of zucchini pickling, lots of cucumber
Mm-hmm.
pickling. So the bread and butter cucumbers, those kinds of things. We preserve lemons like that. We do a lot of lemon, like the Moroccan kind of pickled lemons. Yeah,
Curd.
heaps of pickling. Like with our corn, we'll make relishes, we'll make all those kinds of things. Maybe that's my European background, like pickling things, preserving like that. And we'll have them a lot with breakfast. So like we'll have pickled zucchinis with our eggs in the morning, or we'll have them on sandwiches at lunch. So we find we use
Yum.
a lot of it.
Yep.
Obviously cabbage, all that kind of stuff. That's very European to pickle that. We make lots of kimchi, lots of stuff that's good
Sprouts.
for,
Yep.
yeah, gut health, like all
Yep.
of those kind of prebiotic, probiotic
Fermenting. Yep.
foods, fermented stuff, heaps of that. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. I'm really into doing that. And I'll just crank the oven on. If it's in summer, put the aircon on, crank the oven, put everything in there, sterilize it. I'll do it in a massive batch. I'll wait till I have like a mountain of zucchinis and literally just spend the day processing everything. I'll chop it up at night, salt it, come back in the morning, it's all ready to go, and I'll do it that way. And same with tomatoes. We do tomatoes, a lot of pickled, preserved tomatoes in oil or making sauces and things out of them. Not canning, but we'll do it in the
Yep.
jars like passata and those kinds of things. So that's kind of my two go-tos, freezing and pickling.
Oh, so good. I love a good
Mm,
pickle session. And it's some I
yeah.
don't know, something nice about just you kind of
It's
get into the zone,
therapeutic.
don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. I put
Yeah.
my music on, I kind of go through my little stages, and I like it because I can leave it and come back to it with the kids. Like, it's something I can partially kind of get through and then finish it off and do it in little stages. So it kind of works well for me. And the kids, and they like helping with it too, putting all the salt and measuring things. And so, yeah.
Yeah. It's a good education for them and it's a family activity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So with, I suppose, freezing, you've also got freeze drying. That's something that I haven't ventured down only because, a
No,
freeze
neither.
dryer is a little bit expensive. It's a bit of an investment. But it is certainly a really good way of preserving just about anything. I think you can freeze dry
Really?
nearly anything. Um,
Wow.
so
I
if
haven't looked into that at all.
you haven't had a freeze dryer in the caravan, you
No,
just haven't,
not no,
didn't just
no.
pop one in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyone,
Oh,
if you've got a friend or someone who's got a freeze dryer that you can borrow and you do have a glut, then, go and give it a try because yeah, I've seen some really cool things that have been um, popped into the freeze dryer and then reconstituted and it just looks amazing. Like it looks as good as it was the day that you picked it off the vine. So
yeah, wow.
it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
And then another really old school technique is salting to preserve stuff, which I
Yeah.
haven't got into a lot. I know people can do it with eggs. You
Hmm.
can do it with a lot of different things. Obviously, meat is something that traditionally is salted to preserve. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with that either, but that's another
We
option for those out there.
we did some pickled eggs, like some salt preserved. I call them pickled eggs, but they were salt
Mm,
preserved eggs, just to see what they were like. And we didn't really like them. It
yeah,
wasn't to our taste. But we had friends that really did. They
yeah.
absolutely loved it. So we're like, here, have some salted
Have some
pickled eggs.
eggs.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I
that
know
was.
particularly with the egg yolks, have you tried just the yolks salted?
No, I haven't. I've seen it done. It's really cool.
Yeah, and they go quite hard, and instead of eating them like an egg, you can actually grate them, and it almost tastes like Parmesan cheese because it's salty and it's got that creamy texture.
It is really amazing, like yeah,
Yeah.
what the reaction is and yeah, what it actually does to the
And
yolk.
I think that's a really good point. Like, when you think about preserving foods, like, don't go preserving a whole shitload of zucchinis and then realize that you don't actually like pickled zucchinis. Try different things to see. And like you said, imagine if you did a whole lime, how you can lime eggs, or you salt all these eggs and preserve them and then realize that's not something that you really enjoy the texture of, the taste of, or you don't really know how to use a salted egg in a recipe. Or so I think that's the other consideration when choosing your preserving method, to
Yep.
not just think about how can I just preserve as much as I can, but what am I actually going to use in its preserved form.
Yep.
Because for me, like, I love eating zucchinis with my eggs in the morning, but for some people they might only think that they could use it like a bread and butter cucumber on a sandwich. And how many zucchinis are you really going to go through when you've got 50 jars of them and you
Exactly.
go,
I'm not really going to get through
so
them. Yeah, and also
yeah,
looking at what your family needs are as well.
yeah,
um and I suppose yeah, the other thing that you can always do is give it away at the end of the
mm,
day. If you do have too much in, whether it's um a raw form, whether it's in a pickled form or a frozen form or however, you
yeah,
can gift it, you can give it, you can swap it, you can trade it,
yeah.
you can
And
do anything with it.
that's a great point. Like, swapping, we were swapping for a little while. All of our the cafe down the road did like Reuben sandwiches. And instead of using like doing a traditional Reuben, they were using our pickled zucchinis. So we were swapping coffee beans that she'd give us for our pickled zucchinis for the whole of summer. So, getting inventive and thinking who might benefit from it and how you can maybe swap it for something, because you might not like corn relish, but your neighbor might, and you can swap them for eggs if you don't want to keep chickens or whatever it might be. So I think that's a really cool way to think about using your glut up in a way that serves you as well, because you put the time and effort into preserving it. You want to make sure it goes to good use as well and doesn't just sit on the shelf.
Exactly. And the time and effort to grow too. Like it takes, as much as we say, it's going to be really easy to grow food. No, it takes time and effort, and it is, love and consideration and time and inputs that you put in to grow this, piece of produce. You want to respect it all the way through to the end. We say that with animals, it's a nose to tail, and you use, the whole of the animal, and you make sure that nothing goes to waste. It's produce no waste. Yeah. So you want to make sure that it goes to its, highest use that it can possibly go to at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure. Have you got any favorite recipes to get rid of a whole shitload of a certain vegetable that you want to share?
Oh goodness. I'm a bit of I collect recipes, but then I go looking for different ones all the time. I'm a bit of a Googler when it comes to recipes. But my cucumber, dill pickles. There's a recipe that I tend to go to that I can share. I'm going to get your zucchini pickling recipe off you.
Yeah.
And zucchini chocolate cake. That's a really good one.
That's what I was going to share. Yeah. So we make a zucchini chocolate cake, and it takes 2 of the big, like, marrowy zucchinis, grated. And the best thing about the cake is that you can freeze it. So it's one of those cakes that I make so much of in summer when I have it. And then I pull it out of the freezer if we have someone coming over that afternoon, or in winter it's still a really nice cake to take out and have. I feel like it's kind of healthy because it's got zucchinis in it. You can't taste the zucchinis. Yeah, you can't taste the zucchinis, which is, I think, another perk. Like sometimes when you make those healthy slices, you can taste the vegetable, which is fine sometimes, but I like the fact that in this cake you can't even tell there's any zucchini in it. So
just hidden, whole 2 zucchinis in this cake and no one knows.
That's one of my favorite ways to use zucchinis up. And it's actually, if you double the recipe, it is doubled. So if you use it, you can make 2 and then put the cream in between. And we've made it as birthday cakes. Like, it's a really nice celebration cake too. So it's, one of those things that we always have a few of them in the freezer to use up our zucchini. Definitely one of my go-to recipes. And then the Cornersmith in Sydney. Have you heard of them?
I have, yeah.
They've got a cookbook called Use It All. And I really love their cookbook, and they've got a couple of really cool recipes to use things that are abundantly in season. So they have like a flatbread recipe where it's like a gozlami, and you can kind of put different vegetables in that. So that's one of our other go-tos to use up glut foods, is to kind of make gozlamis, whether it's mushrooms or zucchinis or whatever veggies we kind of have. We chuck it in there with some cheese because everything tastes good with cheese.
Everything tastes good with cheese.
And we just make it into little gozlami. So that's our other really go-to recipe to use a lot of things up, especially spinach. Spinach is really good like that.
I know a lot of people grow like a ton of silver beet and then go, I can't eat that much silver beet. But it is such a versatile vegetable. You can do so much with it.
Yeah, we use it in an Indian dish called palak paneer.
I love palak paneer.
Yeah, it's like a spinach curry with paneer cheese in it.
And the paneer is easy to make too.
Yeah, it's super easy. Just the day before, kind of separate it out and leave it in the fridge. But you can use so much spinach, silver beet, chard, like whatever it is. We substitute any green leafy thing into that, and it is so nice.
Yep.
So
it is gorgeous.
Lots of recipes to use up.
That reminds me, there's an eggplant pickle that we make as well, because we always grow eggplants every year because I love eggplant. And so towards the end of the season, when we're a little bit eggplanted out, I'll just take the last of the run and make an eggplant. I think it's a brinjal pickle. I think I said that right.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's basically like an Indian style eggplant pickle, and it gets smashed. I've never had a batch that I've made last more than maybe a couple of months tops.
Yum.
And that's like, yeah, when we've made a lot, it gets hammered.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, dips are really versatile to make. Like if you're making baba ganoush and stuff, they're freezable. So that's
Yeah.
something else that you can
Yep.
make and freeze and keep and preserve. But you jog my memory. Oh, I'm not very good at growing capsicums. I seem to epically fail at that. But when we go to the Newcastle markets, I will buy a whole like stack of them, like a pallet box of them, and we do the char grilled capsicums and preserve those in vinegar and oil, and that's like beautiful to have on salads and wraps and just with
Just
steak
out of
and
the
things like that.
jar. Yep.
Yeah. Or we put it through pasta, like we slice it really thinly and make like
Yes.
a pasta with it. So if you are good at growing capsicums and get a glut, that's a really good way to preserve
Well,
those as
I
well.
planted about 10 plants a couple of days ago, and we've got probably another 10 to 15 ready to go in when I find where the hell I can find some room to plant them, but they're not going to waste. So, yeah, so we're as they grow and they start to give us lots and lots of caps, and we can definitely do that. So you're just going to have to come back and visit, Elise. You just have to come back so that we can now char grill capsicums, we can do more zucchini cake, and you can make me another one of those amazing cocktails that you made me.
Sounds like a plan. And that's another good point, actually, because it's always around that Christmassy summertime that you do get those gluts. Like, can you plan some Christmas presents around your glut foods? You know, like the end of the citrus glut, you know, dehydrating those, putting them in nice jars with a little ribbon. That's a beautiful Christmas gift, like for Kris Kringles or teachers and things like that. So I think thinking outside of your family, like we were saying before, you can obviously barter with them, but whether people might like them as gifts, things for birthdays throughout the year, you know, you make it all, you sit on the shelf and you can get like a little care pack and give it to somebody. I think that's a really lovely gift.
It's a beautiful use as well. And the other thing too is any food rescue organisations in your area who might be looking for whether that's fresh produce or whether that might be, you know, canned goods or, you know, pickles or frozen items or whatever it is that they take. But often, especially around Christmas, food rescue groups are looking for produce to be able to, you know, go through and make meals for people who may not be able to, you know, spend that time with family or don't have the facilities to be able to cook themselves a meal, you know, people that are doing it a bit rough and tough and need that little bit of extra. So that's a really good utilization of anything that you just can't use or don't get around to use, especially, again, busy time of year if you don't have time to be doing all of the things that we're talking about. And you just go like, screw that. I'm, you know, barely being able to drag my ass out of bed and get through the day. I don't have time to be, you know, chopping and slicing and pickling and preserving and freezing and making. Then, you know what, find your local, you know, food bank or food rescue group and take a drive down there, and they would absolutely, you know, love to have anything that you can donate.
That is such a nice thing to do. I think that's really lovely.
I know that Slow Food Singleton here, they do a citrus rescue. So every year, basically there's a couple of different places that you can go and drop off your excess citrus, and then they'll leave some out for other people. So, you know, everyone can come in and donate it. And then if you want some, you can come and take some. But then they have other people as well, I believe, who'll then come and do whatever it is that they do really well with the citrus, you know, and do exactly what we've been talking about, and, you know, make meals and different recipes and preserves and whatever, and then they go out for donation as well. So,
that's so nice.
I suppose the other thing I wanted to say is if all else fails, so you've got the produce, you didn't get around to giving it away, you didn't get around to using it, and it is starting to just be a little bit less than desirable. If you've got chooks or any sort of livestock, feed it to your livestock if they're going to eat it. If you have a worm farm, blitz it up and pop it in your worm farm. Everything else into the compost. That's the best way to utilize it. So don't just leave it to, you know, basically don't throw it out. I mean, if you listen to this podcast, you're not a food thrower out or into landfill anyway. We know that. But, you know, even if you don't have a compost or a worm farm, go and dig a hole and bury it. You'll be putting life back into the soil. Community
gardens, they love a big donation of, you know, used stuff for their compost. So that's another good place to throw it out, especially that time of year where, like you said, you might be too busy to get your compost cranking, or it's just too much food to put in your compost. You need more greens and browns than food. So yeah, always look out for those other places that you can give away scraps.
Yep, absolutely.
I think that's a good place to end the podcast.
I think that is a good place to end the podcast on. We've tied a bow on it. Oh, fantastic.
And continue this conversation on our Facebook group. Head over to the Practical Permaculture Hangout on Facebook and we can talk more, share recipes. I'd love it if people could share some recipes for their pickling and preserving.
Always looking for a good recipe.
Yeah, cooking for glut veggies, that would be amazing. Like I know there's some pretty epic cucumber salads out there and bean salads, just all those things that we can use those veggie gluts in. That would be fabulous. Thank you for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. We hope this episode gave you some inspiration, confidence, and has helped you in your Permi journey.
Head to the show notes for all the resources mentioned. Definitely the recipes in today's episode. And if you liked our podcast, please remember to subscribe, rate, share, and definitely leave us a review. We would love to hear from you. And if you didn't enjoy it, well, there's tons out there. Go find one that you'll like.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.